Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 676. Today we're going to talk about Bus. And this is the 20th anniversary edition. This was originally published in 1999 by Splotter Games, and now it's being brought back by Capstone Games. It's got a new coat of paint, a new graphic design, updated components, and all that kind of good stuff. I think it's exactly the same mechanics and map and all that kind of good stuff as the original game, and it's just a graphical overhaul, and it's a reprint. This Bus was Splotter's, I believe, very first game that they ever published, and so this was not a game that you could find anywhere except on a secondhand market for lots and lots of money. And so they brought it back out, and it is sort of called the first worker placement game ever. So I think that's probably true. I'm not 100% sure if there was, that's kind of a vague kind of topic, but it's generally referred to as the first worker placement game ever. So let's jump down to the table. I'll show you how it works, and then I'll come back in and tell you what I think. Okay, just for fun, I wanted to show you the original two game boards that came in the 1999 edition. Now, these are actually included in this edition of the game. I don't know that every version that you can buy from Capstone Games is going to include the older components. I think some of their retail editions and things like that will just have the newer components. But I thought to just kind of give you sort of a side-by-side glance. Here is the original board, and frankly, it's very prototypey. I mean, you can see where they wrote the different letters here on the board, and they drew these little buildings and the text here and so on. Now you've got this brand new designed layout and graphical upgrade to the game. So they got the same map, everything's the same in terms of the functionality of all the bits. The worker placement stuff is all over here on the right hand side. You've got a dial here for, let's just call this the time travel mechanic, which I'll get to in a minute. So this is what you've got to deal with now. And what players are going to be doing is delivering these little passengers here through various bus routes, and the game starts with 4 of these here around this Central Park location like so. And over the course of the game, and in fact during setup, players will also be responsible for placing various different building types on the board here. Now there's 3 different building types, and I'll put all 3 of them out here now. And you can see we have houses, offices, and pubs. Those are the 3 destinations that all of these passengers want to get to at various times of the day. And you can also see that I'm placing them out on these number 1 spots. So to set up the game, players will also be putting out 2 buildings of their choice on any slots here with the number 1 label. Now, over the course of the game, you can't put buildings out anywhere except where you have a 1 until you've filled up all the spots with a 1, and then you can start putting buildings out where there's a 2. Once all the 2s are filled up over the board, then you can start filling up the 3s and the 4s and so on. So you're going to have some buildings here kind of seeded out around the Central Park area to start the game. So if you see here, this is a little bit what the board might look like partway through setup. Now after everybody's placed their 2 buildings, you're going to take turns placing out these wooden sticks here. These are your bus routes in your color. And so the first player is going to place out let's say 1 length of their bus route there, and they're green, and then maybe the blue player comes over here, they place 1, and let's say just for argument's sake the red player places there. Now you're going to kind of work back counterclockwise, and so the red player will get a chance to place again. Now red can go a few different ways here. I'll talk more about the rules for placing these in just a minute, but let's say red wants to go there, and then blue will go down here over this way. And then finally, maybe green comes off this corner down here at the lower left, right there. Okay, so you're set up. Now you're going to go over the course of at least probably about 8, 9, 10 rounds. It kind of varies because one of the most interesting mechanics of the game is that each of the players are going to start with 20 of these, let's just call them workers. These are little action selection pawns that they have. Everybody has exactly 20. And you can use as many of them as you want each round. Now you have to place at least 2 of them each round, but if you want to place 5, you can. If you want to place 2 and then pass, other players can keep placing them. Once you've used them up, then they're gone and you don't get any more actions for the rest of the game. And again, the object of the game is to deliver passengers along your colored bus routes. So let's look at the different actions that you can select. First here, you've got line expansion and buses. These are the first two. Now, in this game, when you place a worker out here, you're not going to immediately resolve it. Everybody's going to be placing workers. Once everybody's passed, then you're going to walk down top to bottom and then resolve each of those actions in this exact order. Now, there's a couple of things to notice that set this one apart a little bit from, I would say, the vast majority of worker placement games. I've seen a little bit of this mechanic in some certain games like Dominant Species and stuff, but not really in a lot of worker placement games. Now, the first thing to notice here is the line expansion. Now, the first player to place here is going to place on the A slot. Okay, so even though left to right, we're going FEDCBA, the first person's always going to place on A, and then let's say blue wants to place here too, they're going to place on B, and so on. But when we go to resolve this, we're actually going to resolve these pawns left to right. So when we go to resolve line expansion, blue's actually going to do their line expansion first, and then green will do theirs. However, the person in the A slot of any of these action selection spaces is going to be able to do a more powerful action. So how is that determined? If you look here, this buses concept is a concept that's going to be repeated throughout the course of the game. And what that is the maximum bus. And at the start of the game, each player has one bus. So the maximum bus, or the biggest bus, the largest bus, whatever you want to call it, is the highest stack of buses. So let's say red came here at one point in their turn. When we resolve this, we're going to actually add a bus there. That's all that spot is. And you can see there's only one spot for a worker to go there to add the bus. But if the game state was as such that we see now, let's say before we had placed any workers, let's say we're a turn in. And right now, the maximum bus, or just really the tallest stack of buses, is 2. And that is going to apply to all the players, I should say. So whenever you're doing some of these actions, you're going to look at the largest stack of buses and say, okay, the maximum power of that spot is 2. So if we go back here to our A and B, like so, let's say it was like this, then when the maximum powerful spot, always the A, gets to do the line expansion, they're going to look at the stack of buses and they're going to say, oh, it's 2. So that, guess what that means? I can put out 2 of these sticks. The next powerful spot here, the B slot, is going to be -1 from A. So the blue player in this case can only put out 1 stick. If somebody were to go here, and you can put multiple of your pawn on a spot, then this would be -2 from A, which would be pointless in this case because that would actually equal 0. If you really wanted to do this and just throw away an action pawn, you could do that. You might, if you're playing like really advanced game with a lot of people, try to end the game a little bit quicker. I've not seen that happen in a game, but you could, if you wanted to, go here and place this and then resolve that for 0. I've never seen that, but you could do it. So again, you're always going to look at this bus size when determining kind of the strength of each of these actions. Now in the first turn of the game, obviously, nobody will have resolved this bus's spot. So the maximum action here is going to be 1, and there's no sense in going to the B spot there. So that's your line expansion and your buses. Now let's talk about the rules for line expansion. So when you expand your line, let's say I had done an action where I get to expand 2 sticks worth. Well, you have to do it at the end of your line. So green here has these 2 line pieces there. You can't come out of the middle of your route. That's not allowed. You have to go off of the ends. So the green has come down here and connected to this train station. Now he can go many different ways. He could go wrap back up here. He could go down this way, this way, this way, this way, and so on. But again, you can't fork your route. Or he could come up here and then extend it at this end. And so now he's got 2 new ends there. Pretty simple. Now let's say for his first placement, he wanted to come up this way. So he's got some routes here connected to that train station, which is a nice strategic move. And now his next placement he could do off of this end up here, or he could come out down here. Now the rules state that if you run into a spot where you are going to intersect with an opponent's line, you have to go to an empty space if it's available instead of that space. Now, if all of these spaces were filled up, let's say, red had come down here and blue had come down like this, then in that case, since they're all filled up, green can go whichever way it wants to, and then let's say it would go up here, and then again, if he were to extend off of there, then he would reevaluate that. But let's say it was the case like we had set up here, where not every space is filled up. So there's one other caveat to that, where if the end of your line, so again, you have two ends, this end and that end, meets the end of your opponent's line, so blue just has these two segments here, then you can go in here and kind of, share that line with blue. Okay, so if the ends of your lines meet, then the first player to go in there can go in there and then also share that. Now blue cannot do the same, because once this happened, that kind of negates that ability. But again, if blue, had their route like this, then green cannot do that because they're not meeting the end of blue's line. The end of blue's line is up here. So the only option here for green is actually to loop back this way. So sometimes it's better to run a line into a spot where all of the empty spaces are eaten up, because then you get a choice. So it's a little bit quirky there, but just if you remember it in that way, that's how that works. The only other little quirk here is, let's say we had this situation here with green, and the only place that they could go is go here. Well, now they're going to be running back into themselves, which is fine. But now you may have a hard time figuring out, okay, well, what is the end of green's line? This is the end of green's line, that's obvious, but where's the other end? Where did that come? So when you do that, you'll take the action selection marker that you used to take that action, and you'll just kind of stick it out here as a reminder that this is the end, and now on your next action you have to kind of come out this way, then you can get rid of this, because normally you discard these back into the box when you place them, but they also can work as a reminder if you do this kind of loop back onto yourself. So that probably sounds way more complicated than it actually is, but it's just a couple little quirks on the route placement, but that's the rules for your line expansion. The buses action, which we already talked about, is very simple. You take the action and then you add a new bus, and this is going to increase the maximum bus, or the largest bus size, for all of the players, but also only for you when you actually go to deliver the passengers. So we'll get to that when we get to that point. Now the next two actions here, passengers and buildings, are going to be evaluated similar to the line expansion, but you can see actually passengers, you place left to right and you resolve left to right. So maybe red goes here and then blue goes here, like so. And similar to the line expansion, you're going to look at the maximum bus size. So when we come how to resolve passengers, red can place 2 passengers because the largest bus size is 2, and then blue can place 1 because they're 1 step down, like so. So when you place passengers, let's resolve it as if we were playing red. You can drop passengers at one of 2 places. You have these 2 train stations, one up here in the north, one down here in the south. And in this case, I'm placing 2. So I could, if I wanted, to put both of them down here. I could put both of them up here, or I could split them up as I wanted. Now the game has a limited amount of passengers. So once you place all of these passengers, and this is going to happen in the game, you're going to run out of a supply of passengers, and that passenger action is going to be a worthless action to take. If you do get to the point where multiple people have taken the action and you've run out of passengers, you just place as many as you can legally, and if you can't place the total amount, then you just waste the rest of those, and the passenger supply is empty. Now for the building action, it's a very similar thing, except we resolve it in reverse order, just like the line expansion. And like I talk about in the setup, you're just going to place a certain number of buildings equal to the maximum bus, or less if you're placing on the B, C, and D spots. And you put these on the 1s, and then once the 1s fill out, the 2s, and then the 3s and 4s. Very simple. The next spot is probably one of the funkiest things I've ever seen in the game, and this is this time manipulation spot. And again, only one person can go there, so let's say red went there. And when we resolve this, if there is a pawn here, they can choose to let it tick forward, because if there's no pawn here, then it's automatically going to tick forward. Time is going to progress as normal. In the morning, everybody wants to be in their houses, and then during the day, you've got the offices, and then in the evening, everybody wants to be at the pubs, and just time is going to progress as normal. But if you are placed a pawn here, you can choose to let it go, or you can take one of these time stones, which is worth a -1 point at the end of the game, and then you can sort of like freeze time. So when we go to deliver passengers, they're going to go to the same spot that they did last round. Otherwise, normally it's going to tick up, and now the passengers want to go to a new spot. Now, one of the ways that the game can end is if all of these time stones are taken. And in fact, when you take the last time stone, you will end the game immediately and stop it there without moving on to the next action, which is actually how you drive passengers around and score points. So here's another action spot here called the vroom spot. So maybe workers will come out here. And again, you can of course place multiple workers on any of these action spots. And again, we're going to drive these left to right, and then you're going to try to deliver passengers and score. Now in this particular case, you don't look at the maximum bus size and apply it for all players. You just look at your personal bus size. So if you remember earlier, red had bumped their bus size up to 2, blue was still at 1. So each time you resolve a pawn here, red can attempt to deliver 2 passengers, blue can only attempt to deliver 1, and then red again here could attempt to deliver 2 for their second pawn. I'll talk about that in just a second, but I just want to talk about this bottom space here. This is the start player marker. Only one player can go there, of course. And you'll randomly determine this at the start of the game. This is the start player marker in this edition. If nobody chooses this spot, then this will go to the player on the left. If somebody does choose it, they will either keep it or take it at the end of the round, and they will be the start player on the next round. Now again, each player has to put out 2 pawns. They don't have to put out any more if they want. They could put out 2, 3, 4, 5. Probably not wise to put out so many because again, if you run out of these, you will no longer be playing the game. The other way that the game will end, or one of the other ways that the game will end, is if all but one player is out of these pawns. So if there's 2 players left with at least 1 pawn, then they would be able to play the last round all by themselves if the other 2 players in a 4-player game ran out of pawns. So that's something you certainly have to watch out for. So let's talk about this scoring thing here. And just for argument's sake, we'll say that this just ticked over to here. So now all the passengers want to go to offices. Well, right now we've just got the 4 passengers on the board. We're going to take a look and see if any of them are currently out of space with an office. If they are, which this guy is here, he's actually just going to jump over there and he's already going to be at an office. He's happy. He doesn't need a bus ride. This fella here as well, he's already at an office like that. So what we do is we just take them out of the intersection and then lay them down covering the spot. So now these passengers are not available to deliver and these offices are not available to deliver to. And then you're going to evaluate in the order that the pawns were placed. And so let's just say red was first and he's trying to deliver to an office. Now there's only one office on red's track here. You've got this office up here connected to this. So they can now take this fella here, let's say, and put it up there. And now they have consumed that passenger in that office and they'll score 1 point. Now they could have delivered 2 of them, but even though this passenger is on this track, there's no office along the red track for them to be able to deliver to. If we look over here, let's say we were evaluating, if you look over here, let's say we were evaluating this scenario here, and green has the possibility to deliver. Now he could deliver 1 of 2 passengers. This one here could be linked back to this office, and this one here could be linked to this office. Now, to be smart, what he would do is he would take this one away because blue has a connection to that one, and maybe they could deliver to an office up there. So it's smarter to deliver this passenger than it is this one, because right now, green has sole access to that passenger there. So they're going to take and deliver that one there and then get a point for that. And unfortunately, there's no more legal offices for them to go to. So after you've delivered all the passengers, we just go ahead and stand them up and put them all in the intersection. You could have more than one in an intersection if you need to. And then the next round, you'll be delivering to a pub. And so then you've got this open spot for the pub, and green has access to 2 of them. See here, so now he has these 2 workers here. He could send one to that pub and then send the other one to this pub up here, unless of course there happened to be another passenger there. And then if we were delivered to pubs, again, everybody that's already at the location they need to be is just going to go ahead and kind of consume that location. So that's the overall gist of all the rules for bus. Let's go and see what I think. Okay, so that is a bus. Let's go through my 3 pillars of reviews. The first one we'll talk about is, let's talk about playtime. I would say this game is going to take you about an hour and a half, give or take. The player count, you know, with 5 players, it's going to go a little bit longer. With 3 players, it's going to be a little bit less. I could see a 3-player game being done in about an hour or maybe less than an hour, give or take. I would say with very experienced players, you could get a 3-player game done in less than an hour. Now, I've only played it once at 3, once at 4, once at 5. My barometer for the play time is just kind of a gut feeling kind of thing. But I'd say if you were going any much more than 2 hours, well, I'm sort of fixated on this because I talked to somebody at BGG-Con this year that said they had a 6-hour game of Bus, and I'm like, that seems really outrageous to me and very much an anomaly, and I don't see how this game could take 6 hours. But somebody told me that, and I don't understand that. But I think this is an hour to 2 hour game, give or take. I could see some AP kicking in because there is some real crunchy, noodly kind of stuff to chew on, for sure. And especially if you're playing with 5 players, there's just a lot going on, and everybody's brain is just going to be fried by the end of it. So, but I'd say hour, 2 hours. As far as my favorite player count, well, I've only played it once at each count. I would say probably 4 is my favorite player count, although not by much. I still really liked it at 3, and I really liked it at 5. There's a lot going on 5. It's, arguably more chaotic at 5. So I would probably say, I'd probably rank it in this order: 4, 3, and then 5. But I guess that could probably change over time. And it kind of really depends who you're playing with, because some people will just make like really brilliant moves, or, it just kind of catch you off guard and stuff like that. So the player counts thing is going to depend on really who's sitting at the table with you and stuff, and like how experienced you are, because there's really a lot to sort of unpack with this game. But for me, I'd get it. If you had a group that was mostly, smaller player counts, 3, 4 player games, this will be great. It works fine as a 5-player game. The 5-player count is typically a hard one to pull off. So is a 3-player game, actually, is a hard one to pull off in board games, because just the dynamics of the actions that are available and stuff, the way that it works out. Like a lot of times it's tricky with a 5-player game, or it just goes too long with a 5-player game, or in a 3-player game you've got 2 players ganging up on another, or 2 players ganging up on each other and the other one slipping through, which this one doesn't really have that problem because of the nature of the game. So that's kind of the discussion about player count. Now, what is this game like? Well, I don't really know. Like I said at the beginning, it's the first worker placement game, theoretically. So it reminds me of a lot of worker placement games where your timing aspects of when you kind of block a space and all that kind of stuff sort of comes into play. But this one, man, it really does something very interesting that it honestly reminds me of a lot of other Splotter games, just in the terms of like the timing and kind of the area blocking stuff and the order of actions and all that stuff. Like Splotter really, they kind of just like hammer that home in terms of getting things done and, setting things up preventatively, defensively, and trying to make people try to make a bad decision. And playing, a lot of the games have a way to you can kind of play what seems like an unorthodox way to play. And then after you played a couple times, it becomes sort of a mechanism that you can use to beat each other over the head with, and that players should be aware of. So that's all kind of nutty what I just said there. One thing, just to highlight that point of view, which came to me, I think, in the second or third play of the game, was the building action. So when you take and you put buildings out, well, you can take a look at the board and see like where everybody's placed and be like, well, Billy thinks he's going to score some points this turn. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to put down a bunch of buildings that are going to just eat up all of those passengers he wants to deliver, and that's just going to not be good. So you could take that building action as a very mean, nasty, offensive mechanism just to kind of screw somebody out of a lot of points that they're going to score. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you probably should be doing that, because if somebody's in a position where they're about to score a bunch of points on a turn, then everybody else has kind of done something wrong and they've kind of neglected, what's happening on the board. But you can kind of like lay little traps like that for people to see like, oh, well, because they're going to do this first, that's going to increase the bus capacity, and then this is going to happen. And if we evaluate this, I can get my route out here first. When they get it, they get to do 2, so they'll be able to leapfrog me around this corner, and all that kind of like spatial timing, mechanical stuff is just going to blow your mind, I think, honestly. But the thing is the game mechanically is easy enough that I think a table, and I've played it this way, a table of all brand new players are just going to have fun kind of building routes and messing around with stuff. And then as the game kind of goes along, people are going to get, better and find those little nooks and crannies and techniques to sort of exploit. And then, as players get better, they're going to be able to do that. And so as players grow together in their skill, that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Whereas if you took somebody, let's say, that had played Bus, 20 times and had really kind of figured out some of these nuances, they would probably sit there and kind of smash other players. Or some people are just, naturally more adept at certain types of games too. But yeah, so there's a lot to kind of, peel the onion with here. But the mechanics and the rules explanation and everything is so digestible that I could see. All right, I know I'm gonna get some snarky comment. I could see this being like a gateway game for people. Just like play it out, like, oh, I got this, I can do this. Oh, and they're gonna move here, and it's not gonna, the first like round or two is gonna be a little funky when the first time you score. The explanation for the routes and stuff, I wouldn't just. That's weird. So if you go to my explanation and the rules, you can see that it's a little funky. But if you have somebody that knows what they're doing and they're teaching the players right, you can explain it easy and everybody will go, oh, I understand. And then that's it. But the rest of the game is very simple and straightforward. There's nothing really complex about it in terms of the fiddliness of the mechanics. The strategies and all that stuff is just, that's going to give you several plays to deal with. And this game really stands up. It's a 20-year-old game, and it's very straightforward and basic. Like I was just saying, but it stands up to me sort of in the midst of sort of the egregious, Baroque, overwrought, thousands of cards and tokens, Euros that come out. This is very simple. You have your 20 workers and your sticks that you're putting out. And that's pretty much it. A little token for your buses, But there's a whole bunch of strategy and ways to revisit this thing over and over and over again. Just the setup. So you play the game and it's like, it says, oh, put out 2 buildings. And I'm like, first time I played, I was like, I don't know. Like, what building should I don't know. An office and a house. Okay, fine. And everybody can do that. There's no reason to get uptight about it and worry about what buildings you're putting out at the very first part of the setup at all. And there's almost really no reason to worry about how you're setting up your initial route, for your first play. So yeah, this is a really, really good game. And I think I would recommend this to just about anybody that likes a good crunchy thing, but there's not a lot of complexity and over-the-top things going on here. It's very spatial. It feels, very 90s in a way, which is cool in terms of, the games. Like, this is in that area, that time period when we had like Tigris and Euphrates and Catan, and we didn't really have too much like sort of crap, layered on top of games. And sometimes I like the crap, I like all the extra theme and all that other stuff. But this was just very pure networking area control game. And it really, really works. The one interesting thing I think really is neat that I don't think I've seen in any kind of game is the whole thing where you have 20 workers and that's all you get. And you can spend as many as you want. And then after you spend them, boop, they go bye-bye. And you don't have them anymore. The last time I played it was a 4-player game, and we had a player that was in the lead, but they had to use their second and their final worker of the game, and they were ahead a couple of points. But then the other 2 players, they got to go next on the next turn all by themselves, and then the other guy passed them, just barely by a point or 2. So points are very crucial and critical and hard to come by. And, you might be like, well, I'm set. That's just like that. That's it. That's the thing. That's like that other little small layer of like, oh, I've got this. I'm doing this, da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, no. When I used that 3rd and 4th worker on a few turns ago, I have screwed myself at the end of the game because he's still got a worker left. And he can just go, I'm going to score. And then just deliver like 4 passengers or whatever his bus limit is. And then that's just enough to get by you. So just the other thing that you're not really worried about and thinking about over the course of the game is just going to maybe come back and bite you at the end. And that's just a super interesting mechanic. I've always said, every time I play this game, I'm like, how come no game has done this where you have like a limited amount of workers and that's all you can do? There's probably some game that has, but nothing that comes to mind. The other real interesting thing that I've not seen, and it really gives this game its extra layer of funk, is that time travel space. Because you're like, okay, the passengers want to go to the home and the office and then the pub, and so you're trying to anticipate that. But you can go and send your worker there and just threaten to manipulate that and just freeze it so they all deliver again. And I think in the 3 games I've played, I've seen it used 1 time. And that was because the person was in a point to eat that time token, get a -1 point, but they were set up in such a way that they would score, I think they scored 4 or 5 points in that round, which is a lot for a round. And so that, or even just, I have seen that spot actually used as a threatening mechanism to put it there and just kind of sit there and everybody's like, ooh. So, because they don't have to freeze it, so they can just let it go. But that just adds some very interesting kind of table talk and discussion at the table. Will he use it? Will he won't use it? That kind of thing. And that's another way. There is a good amount of like long-term planning here. And you're like, oh yeah, you guys can have your point or 2 this round, but I'm set up for 2-3 rounds from now to try to lay the hammer down and actually just go score, theoretically, and get a bunch of stuff. But there's that time travel mechanism is there as a buffer to prevent somebody from doing that kind of stuff. And so there's just a lot of these like layers to think about, and the timing of things and all that thing, and how players spread across the board. It's just so efficiently brain crushing of a game. And I recommend it 1000%. If you can get over that kind of the rules and the idiosyncrasies of like the route laying stuff, which isn't difficult. It's just for some reason can be hard to explain, how stuff kind of loops around, I think, to somebody that isn't too much of a gamer kind of thing. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's just, that could be a sort of a short circuit for some people. Other than that small thing, this is like an across the board, anybody can play this. And this is something you can get good at, and your group can get good at collectively. So I definitely recommend it. The new edition looks fantastic. You can go play with the old one. I'm not sure about the editions. I think there's going to be an edition that has what I showed you, but instead of wooden components, it's going to be cardboard. And there's going to be editions with and without, the old components. I would never play on the old board because I would be so confused what was going on. Having this new board and this new, look and everything and the new design just makes it so easy to kind of digest what's happening. But yeah, I 1000% recommend everybody pick up Bus and just check it out. It's just a really, really fun, crunchy game. But again, it's just super dead simple to explain and get to the table. It's going to work at all those player counts. So yeah, definitely take a look. Thanks.